The Real Deels are on the air now. And now, live from the Swords of St. Michael Studios, it's The Real Deels, Kenneth and Farah Deal. Oh, there we are. I hate when that happens.
I know. Tell me. I'm scared.
Scared me like a toddler.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Okay,
Here
we're on the air tonight. Back from Hawaii. No, I'm just kidding.
You wish.
Hey, I'm wearing an orange color, so just to break it up a little bit from the Johnny Cash black.
I know, right?
But tonight we have the still great and not late Father Driscoll. And this is his book, Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment.
And you know what? Give me that book. You did not leave that book up enough, okay? You know, when you're going to talk about a fabulous guest, we have to, leave this up. Can you guys see this? Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment. There's a lot of books out there in the deliverance community, and there's a lot of ideas that are floated around as de rigueur, as you can get away with trying this and it'll be okay. When you want to get the job done, you might laugh at Catholics all you like, but, okay, Father Driscoll, this is a good book. If you don't have it in your reference library, read it. Okay?
Available on Amazon.com.
That's right. Amazon.com, you can probably find it. And this...
Thanks very much.
Oh, no, this is a great book, Father. This is such a great reference book. I tell them what's in it, but then they won't want to buy it. I mean, but they can see, where I've scribbled all over it, and I've taken, tons of notes and stuff, because it's there's great stuff. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be quoting you in the next book we're working on, because you've got so much information in here that just is... people need to know.
Yeah, that's what I think he wrote it like we did. We just wrote out of our brain. And then once in a while we're like, what did they say again? You go to the internet and look up the quote.
Are you comparing yourself with a brilliant Father Driscoll? I think you're not being very humble.
No, I'm comparing him with me.
You probably got yours out of your brains because your brains, I'm sure, are functional. Mine's questionable, and so I get to do a...
I wouldn't have the patience for
that's the mark of a true priest. Humility, honey. Do you understand? Humility? Ken, did you hear that? He was humble.
No, I'm still working on it.
No, we know that.
What's the bio you'd like to put forth tonight for the new watchers and listeners?
Yes, Father, we're very blessed to have you. Before we get started, could you please lead us in our St. Michael opening prayer so that we can ask for the heavenly angels' intercession of blocking out anything that could interfere with us tonight other than delivering God's message?
You never know.
Sure, and you know what, I'll mention this before the prayer, that some years ago, whichever bad law was passed in Illinois, my Bishop Jenke sent a letter to all the priests to say at every Mass the St. Michael prayer. So we started with this introduction that I'll say in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. A prayer to St. Michael the Archangel for the freedom of the Catholic Church in America. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the divine power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam throughout the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Saint Joseph, terror of demons, pray for us. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Oh, thank you so much, Father.
Thank you. My two patrons, Michael Joseph is my first name, middle name.
That's a good topic. I'm going to save that one for some point, the one on Joseph.
Yes, Saint Joseph, terror
try to
of
stay
demons.
on target. That would be a little side note to do. Tell us your quick bio that you would like everyone to know that relates to your knowledge and so forth of spiritual warfare. You know how you, and after that, tell us how you ended up gravitating to such a dark subject.
Kind of sideways and came into it. Was I'm right now currently a chaplain and a pastor, but was a hospital chaplain in Peoria, Illinois, which is my diocese and where I was born and raised. And while doing that, started taking some counseling classes at a school there, Bradley University, and got a master's degree in counseling, and then went on for a Ph.D. Technically, that one's called Counselor Education and Supervision. So, in addition to more counseling classes, you're kind of studying counselors themselves. What are they doing? What kind of what works for them and what doesn't. I'll mention something about that later, maybe too.
Yeah.
So then, after actually talking to an exorcist, I kind of had this, and I went. That was the Ph.D. was a place called Regent University, which is non-denominational Christian. So it's in Virginia Beach, so kind of a Southern evangelical. They treated me very well there. Many of them had really never much talked to a priest, let alone had classes, pre-sitting classes with them. So that was very neat. But when I had the idea, it'd be neat to, just as that we were studying counseling, mental health issues, but also studying counselors, I thought, wow, it'd be kind of neat to study exorcists. What are they why are they doing what they're doing, in addition to the topic of, demonology. So I proposed that to one of the instructors to be my dissertation, chairman, and he's an evangelical Christian. His eyes lit up. He said, I would love to hear about that topic.
Oh,
so that's how that came about. So the title of the dissertation was, How do Catholic Exorcists Distinguish Between Demon Possession and Mental Disorders?
Ooh, good.
So after, and those dissertations are, very dry and methodical,
Yes.
long, and,
What?
footnotes and all that. So went from that, wrote the book that Catholic Answers agreed to publish.
Oh yeah, that's Catholic Answers. What denomination
the book
was
is
that?
heavier on the faith, and less, it still has both the faith and the mental health aspect.
Mhm.
The dissertation, of course, was heavier on the mental health, and the book is heavier on the faith. But both of them include both of those.
Father, I have to
angles.
tell you, you've got some fans in the room already. You're getting hearts and love from Jennifer and Tony and Jennifer Brown and Ashley. Everybody is thrilled you came tonight. So I had to insert that in, that you've got some fans in the chat room tonight.
Yeah, we interact with the
That's
chat.
very kind, because I've tried sometimes to, I've been reading those, and because I don't know what my problem is with a lot of technology, but there have been a number of weeks I've been reading things and couldn't chime in and say hi or anything. So I don't know. Sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't. Anyway, that's very nice. Thank you, everyone.
What denomination was that you first that you were just talking about a minute ago? I'm just curious about that. Do you
Was, I think he had maybe switched at some point, but in my head I'm thinking Methodist and Presbyterian. Kind of interesting. It seemed to me that the geography had as much to do with. It seemed in some ways I'd have more in common with like a woman instructor I had who was a staunch Missouri Synod Lutheran. I seem to have some maybe more in common with her than she would have had with a Southern evangelical. I don't know about necessarily in the faith, but just kind of approaches spirituality, prayer, that kind of thing. But anyway, it was really neat. I think it was ecumenism in the true sense. These were great people. I wasn't, explicitly trying to convert them, and neither were they me. But on the other hand, we could have good discussions in that.
Well, that's another thing in itself.
One time in class, as an out, they were saying, "Oh, Father, do you want to tell the other students when you're having Mass Sunday?" Because we were there for a couple of weeks for whatever residency. And I said, "Yeah." So whatever I gave the time, I said, something about, and non-Catholics are welcome to come too. And they just, they laughed, and one or two of them came. So that was neat.
Yeah, that's good. Well, the big question that I always ask, and it's like I don't even think I ever get enough on this topic, is every time we run into cases, it seems like it's more some form of schizophrenia initially. If I just went totally science, I would go in there blindly and not suspect a spirit, even if both can be present, mental and spiritual. But I think it's good to have a Ph.D. on, because someone can, is going to say, "Oh, he's just a therapist." It's like, you can be a therapist with an associate's, I think. They can get your state license if you can study for it,
Just depending on where you are, but I think a lot of states actually, including Illinois, require a master's for that. But
Yes.
that would, that depends on the state,
Think so.
the title you're going to use, and things like that.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
I had some good classes and some that were a waste of time. So how it goes.
That's really what we
Very
want.
good
We want
classes,
therapy.
Very good instructors. Yeah.
Except when someone's got brain damage, and how are you going to get a drug to solve a problem that they fried their brain on flakka or bath salts or one of those things?
One
Or
good
LSD.
Catholic instructor I had would, when he talked about meds, he'd say, of course, if we don't prescribe or not prescribe. Someone's talking about the meds they're on, is it helping? Oh, it is. Well, then I'm not going to tell them, well, quit doing it. On the other hand, if someone who says, "Hey, I don't want to go to the meds," oh, okay, I'm not going to say, "Well, you really should." You meet someone with schizophrenia, and you're thinking, maybe they should. Anyway, good Catholic instructor I know, he would always say the purpose of the medicine is to take the edge off. That's obviously not a scientific or medical term, but a very good term for us to keep in mind, because if we're going to talk to someone, they need to have the use of reason, and if they don't have that, well, I can't get very far. You can't get very far talking to someone who's just unable to use their God-given intellect, that faculty.
Well, Father,
if a medicine can help take the edge off of whatever's going on so that they can use their intellect, well, fine, that's great. I don't want a medicine to do any more or any less than that. Just, get this person to a point where they can use the faculty of the intellect.
Father,
reason.
Can I simplify for our listeners? Because you're very educated and you're very theologically sound, as well as in your vernacular.
I'm sorry, no, it comes from the years of being in school. You know how you try and impress teachers?
You have to. You have to. That's how you get a good grade, right? And I understand what you're talking about, but I know a lot of our listeners won't. So if you could correct me if I'm wrong, what you're trying to say is that when you attempt to look at a case and look at the medications the people are on, or the person is on, and you try to understand what is going on with the individual, you have to try and understand, if the medication that they're on is getting them to the point where you can talk to them reasonably about the level of maybe 7 to 12 to 21 years of age, because if not, if you can't talk to them and reason with them, then there's no treatment that can help them. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, thank you. Brings to mind an example. A young man, adamant, the CIA is following me. The CIA is following me. Can I have sanctuary in your church? The CIA is following me over and over and over again.
That's not funny. I'm sorry.
I couldn't get him off of that. There was no talking, reasoning about anything else, because he was stuck on that. So if there was some medicine that could have, I can't remember, not important what ended up with that particular, but not important for our discussion, very, very important in his life. But so that when a person is stuck on something like that and you can't get them off of it,
yes.
There's nothing to there's nothing to discuss if they can't discuss, so it's very sad.
Yeah.
And so I want, if they can get a medicine that can kind of calm them just enough where we can now talk reasonably, great. That's all we're looking for from I'm looking for from medicine.
We could use that more often.
So that's actually one of the main topics I would think. If I can just mention one of the main
Please
topics
do.
I wanted to point out. That, if you think about it, all of us, we're all disordered from original sin, so we've all got our mental, emotional struggles. And someone coined a term, I first saw it in some Irish folk tales, monomania. I think someone coined it, some psychiatrist or something, a doctor, and a couple hundred years ago, but saying how people can often seem pretty, mentally, emotionally healthy, except for, and then there'll be one thing, something as simple as depression. Oh, this person, they're smart, they can do this and that, but they're stuck on sadness and have a hard time breaking out of replaying things that make them sad over and over again. So he called that monomania. Anxiety would be with fear. Schizophrenia, you'd get the bizarre ones, the aliens surrounding my house, things like that sound funny until you meet someone and then it breaks your heart. But so we've all got that. We've all got that, one or more than one. But that's the result of original sin. Some would say, well, a demon of anger, a demon of sadness, a demon of fear. The church doesn't really say anything about those types of demons, but the church does teach that, yes, we are damaged, emotionally, intellectually,
yes.
By original sin. So I tend more toward that one, even not only from a counseling point of view, but even from a Catholic point of view. I tend to look at it primarily, it's this disorder. It comes from original sin. Is the devil making it worse sometimes? I would say he makes it worse 100% of the time.
Yes.
But, always there to make things worse.
But
is the devil the primary problem? Yeah, I think that's very rare. I think he's. I love the picture of a devil with a pitchfork. People. It seems kind of comical. That's what he does. It's got symbolically. Jabs at us. Plus, I like the idea of a demon in looking like he's wearing red tights because he mocks God and he mocks us. So why shouldn't we put him in red spandex and mock him?
I'm all there with you, Father. I am so with you.
My mother used to call that an inherited weakness, and back then people were even struggling on the medical and probably the church side that it was anything inherited at all. But it was like, okay, we seem to have some kind of anxiety in the family. And I learned to pray it off because that's what I tell people to do myself, from some family trauma. Mom and dad died too. And it goes away in 5 minutes instead of a day and a half. And I'd wake up in the morning, my stomach would be sore if I would just ignore it and go to bed and that kind of thing. So but you're asking for help with something that could be capitalized on, like when someone's mourning the lost a relative who just died, husbands for, a recently widowed woman, and it might take a little bit past 90 days, even, that they're going to take advantage of her in one way or another if they can, and play on that, maybe enhance it, maybe try to get suicide. I don't think widows are usually common for suicide as much, but yeah, it's so true. It's like we already have it. It's like a monkey on your back. You have an inherited weakness because it comes down your family line. What's your family's inherited weakness? It's like, remember the things like with the Irish, got a little Irish and myself and my wife also. I think I got about half Irish and half German. And what they say about the Irish, fighting Irish. You got some of these school posters and, the fighting Irish. And that's kind of a stereotype that they tend to get into fights and like drunkards. And well, how about this one? How about they tend to be cops and firemen and of course priests? That seems to be true. We had a lot of priests. We had three brothers that were all priests and bishops, and in St. Louis, the Forrest brothers. They all passed away. The last one passed away, who was the one that was mentoring me once last summer. And there's a bishop and a priest and a monsignor. So yeah, it runs in the family. And they were from the Letterley side, and they were the more primary Irish. My dad's side actually had a couple of monks. I think a monk and a priest.
Addressing Father's statement earlier, Father, if I might just retrace, just to clarify a bit, when you have a client, or shall we say a case, where we have an individual that has been tried on a variety of medication, and like you were saying, you had that one case where, the person just keeps repeating over and over one phrase, like, get me out of here, or I'm not safe, get me out of here, I'm not safe, I'm not safe. And they
sometimes more than a phrase, but still a specific topic that you just can't get them off of.
Or what we notice too is that sometimes there will be, how in the autism spectrum there's like a spinning or a physical need to do repetitive motions, either a rocking or hair twirling, or fiddling with a finger over and over. It's like they're locked into that motion.
Mm-hmm.
What do you usually recommend when families are desperate and they've tried and it's like maybe a year, 2 years into treatment, and the person is still struggling with medication and they're desperate? Would you recommend a minor rite for them? I mean, just hypothetically speaking.
By minor rite, do you mean like the
just
prayers from
yes,
from baptism?
Yes.
Oh, sure. You can even do those. I mean, anyone can renew their baptism vows anytime. I think that's a great one to do.
Well, what if the person won't pray? What if the person can't pray? That's my point, is that, there's so many people right now that their families are struggling to help them, and they get locked into a medication schedule that the medication isn't really working. They're still hearing the voices, and there's still, severe mental vexation in these people, and it's sometimes it's difficult to get them help, Father. And if the person can't pray, or if the person gets angry when other people pray, there's really not a lot you can do, is there?
Right. No. Again, a good Catholic instructor told me that don't get discouraged with people with chronic mental health problems at your hospital chaplain. You see chronic heart problems, chronic kidney problems, chronic lung problems. You're going to see chronic mental health problems. And it's interesting. We don't want to, some people will rightly be, as I am, somewhat skeptical of modern medicine. Not that it doesn't do great things, but we're not, accept everything that comes down the pike. But when it comes to, we don't want to both dismiss the help that might be there from psych meds. Some people might want to dismiss it. That's fine. I don't totally dismiss it. But on the flip side, we don't want to go the other way and say, well, if the meds don't help, that's proof it's proof of demonic, possession or something, maybe a little
you
short of
can't
it.
go to that
Actually,
spectrum.
one thing it's proof of is that the field of psychiatry and medicine do not have all the answers. A person can have chronic mental health problems that are not primarily demonic, the devil's back there, but primarily just, something wrong with the brain, mind, whatever, and we can't fix it. And that breaks your heart. And like you said, yes, regularly, unfortunately, in the hospital I'm chaplain, where I am chaplain, as a mental health unit. So yeah, you're regularly seeing people and talking to families of people with chronic mental health problems. And yes, some people are going to have those until they die, just like they're going to have that, kidney disease and go on dialysis and eventually die of that, or the chronic heart problem, the COPD, what that stands for, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, lung problem that you're eventually you're going to die of it. We do what we can to manage it and help you along, But yeah, the people I see with these mental health problems, I think, wow, the chronic ones, I think they're going straight to heaven because they've just suffered a lot on earth, and oftentimes without. Apparently, only God judges that, but it doesn't look like much sin because they're not in control of some of them. And we're talking about the worst ones. We all struggle with some, some mental health struggles,
that sort of thing.
Talking about the more severe.
So if meds do help them, kind of balance out to where you can talk to them, you can reason with them, maybe you can get them to repeat simple prayers back to you, does that mean that it's not demonic? Those voices in their head and everything else, Father? That's a question from chat.
You know what? I used to kind of some years ago just say, well, the demonic topic and here it sounds like we're talking about schizophrenia.
Yes,
which, by the way,
does,
you nailed that too, because the DID, dissociative identity disorder, what used to be called multiple personalities, for those of us old enough to remember that.
Yep.
That is so extremely rare.
Yes.
So extremely rare. And it's popular. It's in the popular thing enough that occasionally you meet people, just like you meet people who think they're possessed. You meet people who think they've got that, but it becomes kind of apparent they don't. But that's not. I've only maybe once or whatever, or twice, maybe once, seen someone who I was really convinced, and all those personalities are not evil, whereas I think demonic personalities all would be. So I don't think there's much confusion there. Schizophrenia is the one that's more, frightening from that point of view. I'm sorry, I wandered, and you were asking. Was the room from the chat room? I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. It was just, the question, kind of addressed if the meds did balance them out somewhat. But they're still hearing the voices. Does that mean that it's not demonic, even though they're hearing voices? Does it just mean they're suffering from an inner schizophrenia and an inner voice? Is that pretty classic?
I mean, I do accept that there is a type of disorder of the intellect, in other words, what we call schizophrenia, that can cause a person to hear voices. Yes. So if you believe that, which I do, then you don't really need to go to the devil as the primary cause of it. Now here's something interesting. I used to kind of say, well, sometimes it's the topics that people get stuck on with schizophrenia, with that kind of paranoid schizophrenia, would be demons or aliens, which it's different than saying I believe they're, which I don't, but some people say, I think they're extraterrestrials out there on other planets. Oh, okay, that's one thing. They're transmitting into my head. That's a whole other problem, and so you get that thing.
We had somebody who was convinced there was a chip in her toe that the aliens were communicating with her.
No, I mean, those things sound comical, like if you see it on the X-Files or something, but then when you meet the person, it breaks your heart. Cause
it does break your heart.
Really yes,
I'm not laughing. I
and then the other one is the government, government thing too. They're tapping the phone, the CIA following me, all that kind of thing. But so I kind of, when I was talking like this, I'd say, well, you've got these different, what do those have in common? They're all very powerful, very mysterious, hidden forces that can control a person, and that it's hard to fight against them because they're so overpowering smart. And then once at a talk, after talk, a woman asked me kind of privately, but she was like a district attorney or something, some prosecuting attorney, something. She said, why, when I'm dealing with these, schizophrenia crimes, why is it always demons that they're seeing or hearing or, just stuck on? And I said, well, and I gave her my usual spiel. Well, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's aliens, sometimes it's government. She She just looked at me and shook her head. She says, "It's demons. It's almost 100% of the time they're stuck on demons." That kind of made me think, you know what? She's right. I mean, that's not a scientific poll, but in my experience is that too. So what do I think? I think the person really does have this disorder of the intellect, that we call schizophrenia. Something
Yes.
wrong with their thinking process. If that makes that, I'm sorry, I should make that. Just person's not thinking right. But what is the
Exactly.
devil? He's making it worse, and I think he's interjecting himself in a very horrible, cruel way, because that's what he would do. So,
Yeah.
This person's got schizophrenia. That's why they're talking about demons.
Yes.
Now, here's something to
why
think
aren't they
about.
talking about something else? They got schizophrenia, but that doesn't preclude the fact that the devil is, is
That's true.
attacking them.
That's right.
Because he's
One of the things I think that might be overlooked
expletive about him, but
sometimes that when there's a head injury, they can get that part of the brain damage that gets affected when they take some hallucinogens, and you're kind of in a and this happened with a lot of the Timothy Leary people. You walk around and you're in a semi-dream state as though you're not waking up all the way, and you're in that halfway point. You'll be very susceptible to demonic forces as well as your own little dream world. The voices of the past and present, sound effects that are in dreamland as you fade off. Anybody's been up too long and you start to fade off, you get that weird experience, and it's strange. Now, if somebody isn't in the right order of mental faculties, they might think it's some sort of alien or demonic influence. But what if you're like that all the time because of brain damage from a car accident, drug overdose, or birth defects where you don't get the oxygen you need when you're born? Some people might think they're psychic medium. I mean, it does make you more sensitive to some degree, but it makes you sensitive to everything, including your own thoughts coming to voices.
And speaking of thoughts, we have, Father, I have a question directly from the chat room that's related to what we're talking about right now, so I'd like to interject it if I could. There's somebody in chat right now that, speaking of voices in the head, the question is, what should a woman do if she has recurring fast thoughts? I mean, these thoughts are just constantly recurring, hitting her really hard and fast, and they're negative in nature. They're telling her when she's going to die, how she's going to die, and they're not voices. They're just thoughts. First, the person wants to know, is that potentially diabolic, and what should she do about those fast, rapid thoughts that are telling her she's going to die?
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Potentially diabolic, sure, as you said, and we always want to go back to that it's not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Remember that one of the Gospels, I don't remember which version of the Gerasene demoniac mentions the fact that, when Jesus drove out the demons, Legion, it says that the man was sitting there clothed and sane, or depending on the translation, clothed and in his right mind, which I find very fascinating, because what is that telling us? It's not telling us, oh, Jesus made a mistake, the guy was insane. No, it's saying the guy was possessed and apparently also had a mental health problem that Jesus cured at the same time. So the poor person there. Potentially, sure. I always want to do. The people who are listening to your show are probably not a lot more to do to cover the spiritual angle. I presume most people listening are taking time to pray daily.
Yes, we presume they are, because we tell them to.
Don't have to douse yourself in holy water, but certainly, morning and night, use holy water and sprinkle your room, but don't, receive and go to confession, communion, all those things. As one exorcist told me, I entered my dissertation with this because it was such a great line. This isn't rocket science. It's sacraments, sacramentals, and prayer. So if you're doing those, you're pretty much covering as much as we can, and unless you get to possession, but short of that, we're covering pretty much as you can the demonic part. So if she can, it would be good to have someone to, a counselor, someone just to. Counseling is a lot of just listening and encouragement and inspiring hope, and someone to answer back to, like a coach. A coach tells you to go out and run 10 miles or whatever.
And that's big in these cases. That is really big, whether it's part demonic mental or it's all mental. They must have counseling.
So just to have someone to give you the ideas, to encourage you to stay with them and to check in with. So for that kind of racing thoughts, I mean, there are any number of books out there, all variations of the same thing, which is things to calm you down, and you find the thing that kind of helps you, whatever, drinking a cup of tea to slow down, deep breaths, walking outside. Any number of those things can be helpful for some people. You try the ones that's going to help you. They might try some medicines to see if that helps. If they want to go that route, I try to be careful not to encourage or discourage the medicines. But habit is huge. So this is a habit, and by habit, I'm not blaming this person. Obviously, they had a weakness in whatever caused them. Keep in mind, the causes of all our problems are number one, the devil's sinned. So he's one problem, one cause. Original sin, Adam and Eve.
Yes.
The sins of others, when we're being whatever throughout our life, from childhood on up, they can cause us mental health problems, and our own sins. So we got that all.
Well, speaking of those sins, somebody just asked in the chat too. You're basically addressing, when this person has got this vexation going on, that confession as well as the sacraments are good. I mean, how often should one go seek, their pastor and say, I need to get confession in, once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month? How often is good if you're in this state of unrest and vexation?
Person, of course, the sacramental answer to that is, hey, you can go as often as you want. Of course, a person does want to be aware of not putting that into the obsession, and so
yes.
Once a week is more than that. I'd start to say it's still okay, but is it helpful,
yes.
or is it just kind of feeding into the obsession? So any more than that, I'd start to wonder if it's being helpful. But certainly once a week or once a month, as a person needs it, somewhere in there seems to be reasonable and common for people really strong in their faith. So I was talking about habits. So if she can work on habits of slowing down, and the good news and bad news is that it sounds like it might be a chronic problem. That's bad news and good news. Bad news that, you're going to have this weakness. Good news is, don't pressure yourself that I want this to be solved in 1 month, 1 year, whatever. No, just work on building up the habit. No, you're going to have some good days and some bad days. Offer it up as a cross, because whatever physical, mental, emotional, sufferings we go through in this life, we offer up as crosses. Keep your mind on heaven. Hey, this is temporary. This suffering I have is temporary. Yes, I'm hurting now. The full healing will come with heaven, and I'm going to make sure I get there again through those same things, prayer, sacraments, sacramentals. So don't pressure yourself that, I need to have this, I want this suffering to end in this life. Of course we do. But bear the cross. Keep your focus on heaven. We'll get there, if we keep the faith.
Good point, Father.
Hope is hope. That's the virtue of hope. Hope is so important in mental health. Keeping our focus on heaven.
I wanted to comment real quick on the you used the word "take the edge off." I think that's a nice little catchy phrase. I use the word "level the playing field" because this is something we found out from experience. Luckily, it wasn't a school of hard knocks experience, was it, Farah?
Not terribly.
Yeah. And it was nice to see that when you get their mind to more where they're not vulnerable to this psychological, it could be anxiety or depression, that suddenly the demon doesn't find a revolving door when it's actually a demonic cage that's going in and out, in and out, in and out. They get some sort of ability to fight back. And I was thinking that's kind of how it is if it's a woman with an abused husband, for example. They might actually get the courage up if the anxiety is not so high to actually escape and for her life leave. They can't do that at some level when they're battered, whatever, beaten down. What are your thoughts on that addition there?
That's interesting. I remember hearing something like that, like in history or social studies or whatever, that when we say, the people of a nation, you push them too far and they'll rebel against the evil,
yes,
whatever rulers, but that's not quite accurate. They can be crushed below that. I mean, look at the German people were crushed, by the brown shirts and the Nazis and all that. It's not like every German wanted what was going on, but they were so crushed and so dominated they couldn't really rise up. So it takes a little bit of freedom, I think. So maybe we can make that analogy too with, we need a little bit again of that use of reason. There, I guess, the bad and good news of someone who's below that point. Maybe the devil can really torment them, and they're not if they're do not have the use of reason.
Yep.
Good news is they're not sinning if they don't have the use of reason either. So again,
it's a double-edged sword almost, and a double-edged blessing in some ways.
Yeah, I mean it's a cross, but the person who can't reason can't sin at that point.
All right.
We have another question from the chat room since we're talking about mental illness. As we both know, Father, well, I should say you know more so than me because you've done more research. Mental illness can be passed through the generations. They're not quite sure how, but there is real mental illness, and there are real indicators that schizophrenia is passed through a gene, that certain forms of people that are prone to postpartum and depression and that sort of thing can be passed on. And somebody would like your thoughts on, would you consider some of this tendency towards mental illness to be related to generational curses? Although, we know we're not cursed, but the shall we say, the invitation to participate in a curse that has been part of our family. Could you address curses and what your thoughts are on these things?
Yeah, and we might have some disagreement on this because there's room for it within Catholic teaching. The Church doesn't say anything about the whole the generational spirit, the generational curse, the healing the family tree. I've heard different types of that in different names.
Yes.
The Church doesn't say anything one way or the other, so okay, well, there's room for difference of opinion on it. I don't look to it too much. Two reasons. One, I don't see it in Church tradition, so right away I'm leery. I've tried to look that up, and maybe you two would know more than me. I don't see anything about that.
We
before,
don't
like,
use the healing of the family tree, and our bishop does not approve that for our ministry, so we steer totally clear of it, Father.
Yeah,
Totally
okay,
clear.
and if anyone's thinking, well, why is the bishop saying that? Well, someone else correct me, but try and look it up. I don't see anything from any saints or anything in church teaching before about 1970. Was it worded differently or something? I don't know. So, could there be a demon attached, whatever? Sure, I'm sure they could be, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to. I don't see where that gets us. I already know the devil's involved some way. So
exactly. He's sticking his little minions to try and tempt you, right?
So those mental disorders do seem to be passed on. Depending on which one you talk about, there may be more or less evidence of it, because it gets keeping in mind, it gets intertwined with. Some of it genetic seems to be, but some of it is just, whatever. A young woman who, both parents had drug problems, and she did. She said, I saw it growing up. My grandparents, helped raise me. I said I would never, ever, ever, ever do that. And when I talked to her, she was, a young woman having heroin problems. She said, I can't believe this. I promised myself I would never do it. But so even though she'd promised herself, is it a genetic inclination toward drug abuse? Certainly could be.
Yes.
Could it be a devil involved? Certainly could be. Part of it is just that was part of, even though she's, told herself not to do it, I didn't grow up with parents doing heroin. It was not on my radar screen at all. It was on hers. She knew that you could do that. I just, what, heroin? I don't know. I'd heard it, I guess, but it certainly wasn't something my parents were doing. So, that breaks your heart, but it can just simply be something as simple as that, just what is going on around you. So again, you've got the devil, it's all sin. The devil, sure, he's the worst of sinners, so he can be involved. Original sin, yep, that can do it, passed on genetically. This young woman's parents, sins, the sins of others, and then her own choice, whatever degree she had.
What about sleep paralysis, Father? Somebody in the chat room said, could you please ask Father what his thoughts are, if he has any theories about why certain people experience sleep paralysis and some don't, and night terrors? Are those two, sleep paralysis and night terrors, are those tied in together?
And you might, I've heard you talk about those, so you might know more than me. The sleep paralysis, is that something... I've never seen anything about that in church tradition either, as far as being a demonic thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just leery of anything that just started being blamed on the devil since about 1970. Doesn't mean I don't say that in a mocking way, because hey,
of course not.
Whatever, he's a jerk. So he might start something around 1970. I think he did in a number of ways. Yeah, though could the devil be involved in some way? Sure, but those seem to be the sleep paralysis. I'm trying to think. That's not in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is helpful, and it's no more and no less than that. Let me even qualify that. It's sometimes helpful. It's become such a political tool that sometimes it's useless. But it's kind of handy to be able to say to another counselor, this person's struggling with depression, and then know that I can look up and see what specific things that might mean, so that we're using the same language, the same terminology.
Oh, definitely.
But now a lot of that's been corrupted by, it's become so political. Yeah, those two things, night terrors are in there because it's like a nightmare, right? Except that you're
old
eyes
hag
open
syndrome.
and maybe moving, maybe standing up, walking, whatever. Definitely I would take the spiritual route for that, for both of those. I know you've talked about sleep paralysis. Make sure you start praying. Hey, always, every time, say a prayer or more than one. The night terrors, it seems a lot of people outgrow them. I don't deal with children specifically. I talk to parents. It seems that it strikes children. It starts more in childhood and sometimes outgrow it. I do remember someone, and this is interesting, was a Catholic counselor, said when he started sprinkling holy water on his child before going to bed, it seemed to help the night terrors. So I'm definitely not ruling out the influence of the devil. But I don't ever want someone to think, suppose someone's child has that and they've been sprinkling holy water, it's not helping. I don't want you to think, well, either you don't have enough faith or your child is so possessed that the holy water is not helping. We could just say, nope, this one appears to be more of a mental health problem, unfortunately.
Oh, good point, Father. Good point.
Yeah, well, we'll give our 2 cents on something I was going to add on that next week. This is your show, questions and answers.
Yeah, this is the man who does it show. This is the man show.
I want to
You're
put
the
something
man,
for
Father.
you on this, and I'll keep it as short as possible. I want to run out of time. With this paranoid schizophrenia, dissociative, or something along that order, we were asking the big question: what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And that they get involved with reading about this stuff, become obsessed with it, and then anxiety kind of pushed them over to kind of a nervous breakdown. Because I noticed that when these people fall into these categories, they find. And they know about even the Freemason conspiracies that are true. Because I know there's, the little mixture of, now when you're finding out a lot of them came true. My dad was around now. He'd be like, see? There's all that stuff, been saying it for years, since the 60s. And he was perfectly normal. It's just that he knew his politics and his religion and everything. The French Revolution, who started it, who was behind it, all that stuff. Well, they also bring in Illuminati. That's their word for Satanism now, of course. And you got all these, stars on there doing their little stupid Illuminati symbols and wearing the shirts and everything. They're not hiding it anymore. It doesn't make it easy to be a paranoid schizophrenic. On top of that, but they associate all these things with, are obsessed over them, and it seems to fit it. And I'm like, maybe they heard this from a friend and they couldn't deal with it, and they shut down and and their anxiety was already there. Do you think that could be a possibility?
Yeah, and in fact, when I was talking about, the different, again, the devil, original sin, the sins of other people, and our own sins, to some degree we have to take some responsibility to the degree that we're able to for what we watch on TV, what we read, and things like that. So, yeah, someone who recognizes, wow, I've people who love me, family and friends, are saying I get too stuck on this topic of the Illuminati or what,
I know.
Pick your poison. Maybe I should listen to them. Maybe I should be spending more time in prayer and reading books about saints than on this conspiracy. Yeah, so a person's own sins we all have our sins, so I don't want to ever say, oh, you're, mental health problem, therefore you're a sinner. No, it's not that. But, hey, the alcoholic has, at least at the beginning, has some free will. So, and again, we all sin, but we want to be careful of what we say and do and think, because, in my thoughts and my words and what I've done, what I've failed to do, those can all lead to physical problems. I can get drunk and wreck my car and kill someone and hurt myself. I can cause myself mental health problems with my sins too.
Good point. Something we'll add on another next week's show. Any questions from the chat room? We're going to keep them flowing in there. I don't want to miss anything.
No, not yet.
On that one, you can obsess over something, and you're going to have sometimes as a person who might be going over this kind of obsession and fueled by anxiety, and then they're looking too hard for demonic. There was one woman who believed that demon was doing stuff around the house that she was restoring, and she had the symptoms of what you might consider, the classic schizophrenia. And one of them was that it fused some of my hair into the bathroom tiles. And I'm like, then I hear that she varnished them lately. And I said, do you think it's possible that she got some of your hair underneath there? Because it's not characteristic of a demonic thing that we've known and studied and researched or anything or experienced. And she had the thing, it's like a chunk of plaster was taken out of the wall, like, it was just a small size, like the size of a quarter. And then the next day she realized it's been painted over. And I'm thinking, well, that's nice of them. They made a mistake, and they go, oh, darn it. They painted over. Well, it seemed like she just had memory lapses or something. I said, do you think that you might possibly forget?
The devil, if he ever tried any of those things on me, I'm absent-minded. So, I guess I left that light. I guess I lost that and found it somewhere else. Who knows? So he may be trying that on me all the time, and I'm too oblivious to realize it. I really am. It just, well. But once the other priest I was with had gotten a new dog, a dachshund, and someone had called and talking about, they were out of state, so it wasn't like I was going to go see them, but whatever. The devil, they were sure they had something in the house, ghost devil, whatever, because of whatever, pulling blankets on the floor and some kind of brush against and whatever. And I was thinking, well, okay, but you know what? If that's the most terrible thing that Satan, Lucifer, the prince of darkness, the one who wanted to rebel against God, and all he can do is pull down blankets and brush against you. I told the person, kind of lightheartedly, not making fun, but just lighthearted, like, you know what, the other priest just got a new dachshund. He pulls things off the bed and brushes against me. If that's all the devil can do, you got nothing to worry about.
Exactly.
And so number one, I don't think it was the devil, probably whatever, imagination, exaggeration, whatever. Number two, if it is the devil, say your prayers and laugh at him. So what? So he pulls off the blankets and brushes against you.
Don't pay him attention.
Back to that. Yeah. Don't get stuck on it.
TV shows and movies are fueling that a lot there, Father,
And so many people, Father, we know that, basically you can't separate yoga from the demons that, basically the worship of the demons and the poses. Could you explain to people how they are not going to get possessed by doing yoga, but how can they invite the actual spirit?
And again, we may have difference of opinion. Thinking of a specific, they call those poses, don't they, in yoga, as opposed to a stretch, but I'm still not sure.
Well, because the poses in yoga, exactly.
I'm not sure anything like that can inherently be. In other words, what if because I was a runner for years, what if I had, some stretch I had learned and did for years and then found out later that it had been actually borrowed from a pose from yoga? I'm not in danger now that I was doing that. It's like, again, we got to kind of step back and say, okay, breathing deeply and stretching muscles is a good, relaxing, healthy thing to do. So go ahead and do those. Should you chant the name of a false god when doing them? No, don't do that. Don't chant the name of a false god with or without stretching and breathing.
Or how about leaving yourself open to spirit while you breathe in deeply?
Yeah, always.
Like channeling.
Where I always want to say, what are we doing here? Are we, if I met a guy once, great. It was after Mass one time visiting, and where are you from? What do you do? And he has a martial arts school somewhere out of state. He was visiting family. Oh, cool. And then I thought of this topic. Hey, what do you tell, faithful Catholic guy, what do you do? How does this relate? You're teaching the martial arts, spirituality, Eastern spirituality. You worry about that. He kind of rolled his eyes. So someone asked me that when they come to my school. He says, I am teaching a sport. It is whatever it was, Taekwondo. You want spirituality, you're supposed to go to church. I'm teaching a sport here. So he was in no danger of teaching. So what if Buddhist monks developed it or whoever did? I'm not making fun. I don't know who developed which Eastern martial arts. He's teaching it as a form of exercise, self-defense, the physical things. He's not there teaching spirituality. He's telling people go to Mass for spirituality. So he's in no danger. No one's in danger from those, from specific things like that, whether it be a yoga or a martial art or something. Now, what are you thinking and doing? What is your instructor doing? I know someone was going to a park district one, and the instructor kept talking about it. They quit going. They said, do you think I should quit going? I said, yeah, probably. It sounds like you're going to someone who's teaching a false religion while they're stretching and breathing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I would quit going in that case.
Yeah, never go to a guru or anything like that. Yeah.
It's the flip side. We want our relationship with Jesus Christ, so don't do anything that's starting a relationship with the devil. And stretching and breathing or martial arts, those things aren't a relationship with the devil. Start listening to someone trying to preach about it. Oh, yeah, maybe avoid that person.
Well, they can always try
Good
different
advice,
stretching
Father.
exercises.
Very good
They don't have to do the
advice.
Kundalini snake stretch where you lay on your stomach and you arch your back up, and then all the other poses that are in a row, honoring, venerating, and worship poses. And it's like the Ouija board. My parents played with that in the 60s at Halloween parties. They just thought, hey, if you got a ghost here, they'll answer. It's like picking up the phone and dialing a number at random and you get someone in Australia. And of course it wasn't that. And now we know demonics answer the phone all the time.
Yeah, I would maybe make a distinction between the two things you said, though. Using a Ouija board to try and contact anything, well, I don't know what anyone else, unless you want to use them for firewood, that might be a good purpose. Other than that, I don't know what, using the Ouija board to contact spirits. But again, with those stretches you're naming and me knowing nothing about them, I'd always be asking, is this something that's, I don't know, stretches your muscles, helps you feel better that way? Then you don't have to. Put it another way, if someone was taught that it's a good way of stretching, whatever, and knew nothing about the fact that it was supposed to honor some other god, I think they're perfectly safe.
It's
if someone
the
should
intention
told
of the
about
heart, correct, Father?
Pardon me?
Definitely the intention.
Yeah, sometimes you can do stuff without knowing it, and then as soon as you're told, then you are going to be responsible, and you should avoid it. Ninjutsu, for example, they do, the more real part of it didn't come out till later in the late 80s, 90s, and they do these signs and they move their hands in different. Those are all actually symbols of dark spirits. And ninjutsu is kind of the dark karate or whatever, the Japanese, and they're drawing symbols and they're moving them to.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but even there, that's symbolic of it, because some human being, I don't think those are anything inherent. In other words, some human beings attributed those movements, connected them. But if another human being doesn't connect them, I just don't. I wouldn't worry about them.
It's good to know about it, though. That's what we're here for.
What is that thing that they do on the movies? Sage. Well, I don't know. Is sage used in air fresheners? If it is, it's not dangerous. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's totally different.
Scent or something. If you're waving around thinking you're going to be driving away a spirit because sage does something to ghosts, well, yeah, it does. That's a problem, But just the scent itself, I don't know. Well, I guess that's a different kind of sage that I put on pizza or spaghetti or something, right?
Precisely.
It doesn't smell like pot.
We have a question from the chat room, Father, regarding former knowledge. One of the signs of if a person is in need of an exorcism. And the person would like to know, is there anything in the DSM that explains specifically how a person could have knowledge that they have no business knowing, like, let's say, of a language, or, that they've never spoke, or information that there's no way they could have? Does psychology attempt to explain that sort of, shall we say, ability, supernatural, preternatural ability?
That would depend on the school of psychology. It's funny how the exemptions that modern psychology likes to think it's scientific, and then goes back to goofball things from Freud, or in this case, I guess Carl Jung, who was not such a goofball, but he'd talk about wasn't he the one with the? I don't read a lot of those guys at all. I think he was the collective subconscious. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what the heck are you talking about?
I would say from a scientific, modern point of view, I would say no, they have no explanation. Unless you get to the parapsychology, which isn't real psychology, it's more. And I find those things fascinating. I'm too much a skeptic to believe in that. So no, I think that someone, to answer that question, and it's interesting. I got the instructions of the ritual in front of me, and the English translation, this particular, keeping in mind the rights of the official ritual of the original, 1614, is in Latin. So any English translation is someone's translation, which may be more or less, we can debate about different words. One of those signs of possession is, says faculty of divulging future and hidden events, but I think a more accurate translation would be distant and hidden events, which I think is a little better because the devil can't see the future. Now, he can fool people, of course. Devil knows my schedule for tomorrow, probably. Devil might know someone else's schedule for tomorrow and knows that we're going to meet in the hallway of the hospital or in Chaplain, or that there's a likely possibility. He wouldn't know it for sure, but he'd say, oh, those two are probably going to meet up. So if I went to a psychic and they seem to predict it, it's not because the devil knows the future as only God does, but he knows a lot more than we do and can look at schedules and make predictions for the future. But certainly he can know, as I said, I think a little more accurate translation would be hidden or distant events. Hidden meaning this person starts telling me something about my past. No, I don't think in answer to your question from the chat room, nothing in psychology can we might want to know, hey, did that person read about me? Did whatever. The language thing, did they actually study that in, junior high school and now remembering it years later? Okay, maybe, we want to find that out for sure. Did they know it? But no, if it's an honest case of they knew some hidden or distant event, meaning how would a person know, what's going on in some other place far away right now? Well, they can't, only the devil might because he can, move quickly. The language thing too, unless they actually did know the language, no, there's no psychological explanation for suddenly. Psychologists, modern psychologists would be saying somehow they learned it, if they're not open to the possibility of demon possession. They'd say, oh, somewhere along the line that person learned that language.
Speaking of possession and the rite of exorcism, Father, the 3 doors to demonic possession involve establishing that relationship. And can you explain to our listeners operum magicum? The works of magic?
Sometimes the exorcists talk about doors. They'll talk about violations of First Commandment in particular. Worship of false gods, the Ouija board, all that garbage.
Yes.
Sometimes they'll talk about trauma. Because of it's not the trauma itself, but a person can get stuck on hatred, revenge, bad things, and if they keep repeating those, it seems unfair. But obviously, the devil's going to like those things, so that's another door. But the 3 specifically that the rite of exorcism names, and again, you get different English translations, but operum magicum, works of magic, literally. Well, what does that mean? Some English, like the one I've got, says necromancy. We could just say attempting to communicate with spirits. So, sorcery, witchcraft, spiritualism. Didn't they call it that like 100 years ago? They talk about spiritualism.
Yes.
See people in those old suits and ties and dresses sitting around a table doing whatever. So that's a mockery of prayer. So that's where, prayer is our, keeps us in touch with God. This other thing is the opposite, getting in touch with some other spirit. Well, other spirit's not good. So it's going to be demons. The malefica signa, evil signs, again, what does that mean? Apparently like rituals. So that'd be like a mockery of the sacraments. It's kind of interesting and scary that sometimes don't they use like a chalice sometimes, an altar, candles, some of the same things that we use in a good way, they're using in bad ways. So, sorcery, witchcraft, spiritualism, whatever kind of, whatever they use for rituals and those things. And then malefica instrumenta, evil instruments, and that apparently means smaller things. Why do I say that? In other words, why couldn't the Ouija board be an evil instrument? Apparently the rite means something smaller because it says if it's swallowed, the person should disgorge it. So hey, I thought, when I'm reading that, I think, oh yeah, they probably didn't swallow a Ouija board. So this probably means small or little. Yeah, that would be a problem in itself. So it probably means smaller things. I don't know why. I don't make it a point, and maybe I should a little more, to read the particulars of what these, witches and Satanists do. But I don't know, what are their crystals, little amulets. Sometimes that's translated. Some English translations of the rite of exorcism call that amulets. So some kind of a cursed little object that's small enough. The rite says that if it's hidden on them, they should, be forced to reveal it, and it should be burned. And if they've swallowed it, they should disgorge it. It should be burned. So it must be little things. So there again, a mockery, probably mockery of sacramentals. We use a medal or a scapular or something small that could be swallowed. They have a mockery of that, something small that could be swallowed or hidden on them.
And get them to vomit it with the ritual. That's a fun thing. It will stay there,
Yeah.
and it will stay there for life. It's so weird. It's the part of the spell that it won't bother their stomach or cause ulcers or anything like that. And the doctor finds it and pulls it out. It'll stay there until they get the contract broken or whatever. Whatever the object is.
And if I can go back to that too, talking about, I'm not and get different opinions from different exorcists. The ones I talk to, again, we don't want to think that that the devil is stronger than God is, that we have to worry about if someone walked by and put a curse on me or something, or touched me with some cursed object. And now, I don't like to subscribe to what in my head I call the disease model of demonic attack, like, I can catch it. So someone does that, could it maybe cause a problem? Maybe. But if I'm using holy water morning and night, I'm believing, that's more powerful than any stupid thing that they happen to touch me with. They're in more danger of it than I am. Now, if I'm not, saying prayers, using sacramentals, doing sacraments, that's a problem. Again, now I don't have a relationship with God, or at least a weak one, and maybe those things would have an effect then.
Yeah.
So,
or you could be in mortal
when
sin.
About those, I say, well, cover your bases. Do the things you're supposed to do spiritually, and then don't worry about those.
And that's the thing. People don't know what they're supposed to do spiritually, and that's something to define in itself. And it's serious because most of them don't. Almost all of them. And that's a good thing. As a priest by default, we assume priests should be less vulnerable, except for God's will. With the saints.
Yes.
And that seems to be the case.
Just like everyone else, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, hey, great, because as a priest you're going to mass daily. So if you're, avoiding occasions of sin and getting to confession regularly and taking your prayer time, and as a priest you're receiving communion, daily mass, great, yeah, you're in good shape. You start screwing up in one of those areas, and you're in really bad shape.
Good point.
Questions from the chat, Father. When people have difficulties wearing holy or blessed metals, what do you think about people that just, they don't want that? They don't want to allow you to wear any kind of, St. Benedict medals or crucifixes, and they don't want that stuff in their home. They're not really interested in their healing, are they?
I mean, so much is, people probably, I don't know, there's some protection in being innocent. In other words, someone who's not Catholic has never heard of the things we're talking about.
Yes.
Clearly, they're not going to be going out and getting them, buying a St. Benedict medal or anything else if they never heard of it. But unfortunately, they're more open than those of us who have been blessed, and we should always keep that in mind. The faith is a gift, and we've been blessed to know about these things. Yeah, we're definitely protected more by having them. Is that kind of what that question was about? And then you're talking about someone who deliberately does not want them. That can be a Protestant who, in the way they're raised and in good faith, thinks those. Heard some Protestant minister talking about the usual accusation. Well, that's a form of idolatry. And I want to say, no, it's not. So anyway.
Like the crucifix.
So I wouldn't necessarily attribute opposition to that to a demonic thing. It might just be but it's not good, a strong, whatever Protestant biblical thing. And if I don't see, blessed salt in the Bible, then it must be an idolatry thing. Well, I don't know. You do see the body of Christ there, and you're not believing that very well either. So, anyway.
And following
again,
along
it depends
those
on
lines,
where they are. It depends on their relationship. Are they doing their best? Only God knows. Are they doing their best sincerely to build a relationship with Him, and therefore neglecting these things?
That's a good
only
point.
God knows where they are.
Father, along those lines, when somebody is mentally ill and the people around them suspect that the demonic may be at work overtime in them, and they try and either take them to church or they bring people over to pray with them, and the person just absolutely freaks out and refuses to pray, does not want to be around the people at all that are trying to pray with them, and literally just starts going berserk, screaming and yelling and pushing and shoving. Is that a sign that there's potentially demonic activity if the person absolutely refuses to pray?
And those are the ones I tend to bump into, and you can't do. I never say that. It would, depending on the bishop, but a lot of bishops are going to say, "Wait, I don't see that as evidence of and I think I can speak for my own bishop in this one.
Yes.
I don't see that as evidence of possession. Now, whether it's something less, keeping in mind the church, we don't really have a definition. You know, you and I and others use these terms obsession and oppression. It's okay to use them as long as we are careful to say those aren't church. You know, you can't find those in the catechism. Catechism talks about temptation on the one hand, the most subtle and most common demonic attack, and possession, the least subtle and least common. But we know there's something in between, like John Vianney, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
The devil couldn't get him with other temptations, so beat the heck out of him physically. So, yeah, what you're talking about, I come across that. Am I convinced the devil's involved? Absolutely. I've never presented that to Bishop and say, hey, I think you've got a case of possession in the diocese because of this. Because we'd look back at, he'd be more careful as I would to say, well, okay, where's the speaking the language? Where is the knowledge of
exactly
defense? Where's I'm pretty convinced that he would say the same thing that we're talking about. He'd say, hey, prayer, sacramentals, trust in God. You know, if the person themselves won't do it, family, be patient, keep doing those things for them. It breaks your heart.
It does break your heart. It's so
physical,
sad.
mental, spiritual. These chronic things. You know, what's worse, that or family? I know a good Catholic family, and whatever. One of the children got their 20-something and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm an atheist." Oh gosh, I mean, this couple is heartbroken.
It seems like one in every family, at least.
They don't have that aversion that you just talked to as far as screaming and all that. They're just like, nah, I don't believe anymore. Like, oh my gosh.
That's almost worse. It's like, how do you
know.
reach them? And you know that we tell parents that call us with that. Then now it's time to step up your prayer life big time because you got to attack it where it came from.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of another family that went through a similar thing. I don't know if the person became atheist. I think so. They just drifted off and maybe went to some other church or whatever. And then, mom and dad just heartbroken and praying. And one day, this child, again, they were talking about adult child here, 20s, 30s. At some point years later, called back and said, you know what, it's time. I need to come back to the faith. And then they were mom crying with joy that they're now back in the faith. So yeah, we just celebrated St. Monica not long ago, didn't we? A few weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah, never give up.
Never give
That's
up.
true.
I know. 32 years later, there she is.
And she's in heaven with her husband, I'm sure now. Well, her husband
yes,
from life.
and her son.
And her sons.
And her son.
Yeah.
Sons. Yeah.
What a worthy sacrifice it was.
Yes.
That's a totally unselfish thing to do, too. Even if she started with initially with selfishness, like some people have that need to help somebody because somehow they're healing themselves while they help somebody else who might even have the same problem. And her case was different. And you know how it is. Some people just want to love and help, and then they marry the worst person in the world. They won't change, and they won't make any commitments. They won't. They say they're going to become Catholic, for example, and they won't leave their kind of atheistic lifestyle. Do you think they give up alcoholism and then they stayed with it? We deal with this in spiritual warfare as well, and counseling, and on your side of things as well. It's sad that I wish there was a magic bullet, and that's what they're looking for.
Jesus' miraculous healings. Jesus raised Lazarus and the young man and the young one from the dead, but they died again. And the miraculous healings, all those people died. So Jesus wasn't saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this, and now you'll live for all eternity on earth." That was never part of it. It's more like in addition to relieving suffering, of course, but also kind of a pointing toward heaven. That hey, here's what heaven. All this will be healed permanently in heaven. It's a temporary healing he's doing on earth. The people are still going to eventually die, all of us, obviously. So he's kind of pointing them toward heaven. Hey, here's there's a sign of the final healing in heaven.
Here's a thought. You ever wonder if, since Jesus died, maybe something changed that people in the past before Jesus was born even, that there was no moment where they had this afterlife experience or whatever near death, and then they were told by an angel or whoever spirit encounter, there's too many of them, that it's not your time, or one of those things, those scenarios where it seems like heaven at first, it's not your time, and then they send you back, and right around then, at the exact time, you wake up, on the operating table. I mean, what if, in a way, that's kind of being resurrected, but you've been sent back by a heavenly being. Have you?
I'm not a firm believer in those. Just the more I've read of those, and you can read different stories that. I'm not sure. I'm sure people are sincere, number one, I've been a hospital chaplain 15 years.
Wow.
People get revived fairly frequently, and the vast majority of them don't have those experiences. So I'm kind of leery. I'm also kind of leery. It almost sounds like God was surprised the person came back or something. There's something about that seems a little bit off to me. And finally, there was someone studying those cases in India and found out those who believed they had, had some. It was I'd have to read that again, but was quite a different experience that fit with Hindu beliefs, which kind of implied that this is actually something going on in this has to be a very strange, bizarre mental state of, heart stopping. So who knows what the brain is doing at that moment? I don't put too much on those. I know the people are sincere. I don't put too much on it. God knows when we're really dead and when we're not really. That sounds terrible. It sounds like a Monty Python thing. Or no, what was that? Princess Bride.
Yes.
Almost dead. He's been almost dead all day. Give him a break,
Oh, my goodness.
Well,
you guys, we're at the top, the top of the hour, and we've gone over.
I thought actually you were going to ask about. I'm sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. Go ahead. We were going to ask about what, Father?
That's okay.
I thought you were going to ask about. I find it fascinating, and no solid answer. Why apparently fewer possessions before Jesus and after? I mean, the obvious answer is, hey, the coming of Christ into the world. But because the Gospels are very clear, drove out many demons. We're not,
Yeah,
Israel wasn't that
people
big an
are always
area.
wondering why. Why weren't people talking about possessions?
We're not seeing that many.
Yeah, it's just, it's hard to understand, Father. It really is. And especially if you're not familiar with the Gospels or possession, it can be very, very confusing for people.
That the coming of Christ into the world reduced the number of those.
What a blessing.
One answer. I don't know what.
Well, Father, I have a lot more
course,
questions regarding mental illness and schizophrenia and possession. I'm wondering maybe if you can come back maybe in November before your schedule gets full.
November sound good?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to come back.
Wonderful, because I've got at least another 20
here.
questions I want to ask you, and I know our listeners are going to want to ask these questions too, because we, as you, are running into a lot of mentally ill cases, and unfortunately they are very plagued and vexed as well. And it's just like you said, it's just very, very sad. It's very frustrating what people are going through right now. This is the time of year this stuff kicks up. We can't thank you enough for joining us, because you're always a blessing and just such a wealth of knowledge, such a wealth of, shall we say, support to have around as a very, very holy priest. Yeah. And we're so glad you came in tonight, Father.
You're kind of fading in and out there. Darn the technology.
Isn't that strange how that happens? Our big announcement is we're going to Friday nights. We're going to switch from Thursday night to Friday night at 8. So hopefully you can save us a night in November and join us. And we thank you all. Never forget.
You have been great. We've never even met in person, but
not yet.
Everyone out there, Kenneth, have been good
we
friends.
Still consider your
thank
friend,
you.
Yeah.
Kenneth, have been good friends, and we get to talk not as often as I would like, but great to be in touch with them to get advice and inspiration.
We're so blessed to have you as a holy priest on the good side.
Yeah, we love your book. We always recommend it all the time, because there's not a lot of books.
To everyone. And everybody is saying, thank you, Father Driscoll. Thank you, Father Driscoll. Everybody they love that you join us tonight. So we'd like to tell our audience, never forget, the battle's already been won. God has made sure there's a way to come home in Christ Jesus. So you guys, say your prayers, rabbits. Don't forget to say thank you, please. Mind your manners. And be here next Friday night. And we thank Father Driscoll for joining us. And like I said, we will have him back in November for more mental health versus possession questions. So from The Real Deal, subscribe so your little bell will ding and you'll get the notification. And God bless everyone.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one more thing.
If
you have a problem with resolution, click on the gear in the bottom and you have to set it to a high resolution. Set it to HD 720p or higher. If you're on lower, you'll definitely see something where you can't read the words, like the text at the bottom of the screen. So I'm sorry, I forgot to add a text note because we're too locked into our fascinating guest. Next week, same time? Yes?
Same time, but same different day. It's on a Friday instead of Thursday.
You'll get used to it. Hang in there.
Hey, God bless
you, Father Driscoll. We'll talk soon. God bless you.
too. God bless you. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
The Real Deals TV show, copyright 2018, a Swords of St. Michael production. Any unauthorized duplication or rebroadcast or retransmission of this broadcast without the express written permission of the Swords of the Saint Network or that of Kenneth and Farah's Deel is strictly prohibited. Hello, this is Brother Kenneth. You can help support our ministry by subscribing, liking, and especially viewing our videos on our website, which are designed for self-help and education to help yourself and help others. And it's all free. Make sure you check back every week because we'll have new content loaded every week, at least another episode of The Real Deals TV, and share with your friends. You can also click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button near the top right of the screen. It'll give you notifications as soon as we get new videos uploaded, as we'll continue this huge library of education, unlike anything else that you've seen on the web so far. Putting the real truth, the real facts, none of this mamby-pamby stuff that has all of this new age stuff, witchcraft, keys of Solomon, none of that stuff is going to be here. Just pure, unadulterated Christian Judeo solutions that work. That's at youtube.com/therealdeals. Or you can surf there from the swordsofstmichael.org.